name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good morning. Outstanding. When I say the word slavery, it conjures up in our mind very charged and powerful imagery coming from a portion of our nation's past. But the institution itself far predates the founding of the United States, and it can be found at the very beginnings of human history across every continent and every culture on the globe. No matter what form it takes, and no matter what form it has taken, it has one single defining characteristic across the board. It is founded on the thesis that there is a price tag that can be put on a human life that is greater in value than any individual. And so it is somewhat easy to identify the countries and places where this practice is allowed to survive and flourish. And thankfully, in our time, we see an ever-rising crescendo of voices speaking out against this evil. But there is another kind of slavery. There is another kind of servitude that is not so obvious, that is not so easy to see, and because it is more subtle, it is more dangerous. Because it is a prison into which we sell ourselves. We read in the Epistle of St. James, "Behold, you ask, and you do not receive, because you ask wrongly in order to spend it on your passions." And this word, the passions, dapathi, is one of the most important words in the Orthodox spiritual vocabulary. And it does not mean, the passions does not mean those things that you're excited about and that you really like. Dapathi, the passions, does not refer to those things that capture our imagination and our interest. Dapathi, the passions, are those affections, those desires, those things that we hold on to that have moved far beyond their proper scope, that have gone from being a good appetite to something that all of a sudden controls and enslaves us. They become neurotic, they become compulsive, they become addictive. One of the classic examples is gluttony. It's perfectly natural to feel hungry. It's even a good thing to enjoy a fine meal. But suddenly, when the use of food goes beyond its measure and goes to an extreme and becomes compulsive, we've moved out of the range of normal appetite, and now all of a sudden we're in the realm of pathi, of slavery, of the passions. And quite frankly, it can be anything. Whatever thing, whatever activity, whatever inclination we have in our heart, that suddenly becomes that neurotic measuring stick by which we judge everything else, which we will not let go of, and which everything else refers back to. There we have our master. There we have our slave. Identifying these items is really very easy. We have only to look where we're afraid. What do we fear to let go of? What do we fear to forgive? What do we fear that we cannot happily live without? To these things we are enslaved. And perhaps the most brutal of these masters that lord over us is the desire and the felt need for the approval of others, for the praise of others. And St. Paul talked about that into the epistle that we heard this morning, where he said, "Behold, there are some of those who wish to make a good showing in the flesh, who would demand that you be circumcised, who would demand that you undergo some sort of external formality," as he says, not because of faith, not because of a desire to keep the law, not because they're faithful to the things of God, but because they want to escape persecution, because they want to escape criticism and ridicule. So they would have you do something to conform, to make it easy. And do we not have these masters around us all the time? Do we not hear them say, "If only your Christianity looked and sounded the way that I wish it looked and sounded. Then I might be interested. As if the price tag of our integrity was a small thing to pay. And then they might even say, well, so what if it is? And if you do pay with integrity, at least you'll be on the right side of history. And then if that ever changes, you'll just go along with your next master. Because there is nothing that we fear so much as the threat of persecution, whether that persecution is our body and our mind rebelling because we did not give it the addiction that it wants, because we did not feed the passions that it wants, or whether that persecution is the ridicule and isolation from others. There is nothing we fear so much as this. And yet, against the backdrop of that fear, of that horror of isolation, in stark contrast, the message and the gospel of Jesus Christ shines even more brightly, saying, in fact, that it is the crucified and risen Christ who defines your value, who defines your integrity and your identity, and not the voices of everyone else. And so, there is no price tag that will buy your integrity as Orthodox Christians. This fear of isolation, this fear of standing alone, is perhaps in our time the calling of Christ to this generation, perhaps indeed a vocation to integrity under all circumstance. But in those moments where the threat is hard and imminent, should we find ourselves face down with fear, speak into your hearts courage with the words of the prophet Elisha, who in 2 Kings, also finding himself outnumbered, also finding himself unaided and isolated, said these words: "Behold, open your eyes and see. Those who are with us are far more, far greater than those who are against us. Therefore, be not afraid."